Maybe there it is. How's everybody doing this morning? Everybody beating the heat? And the hot one yesterday was. Today I think it's going to be equally as warm, so make sure you stay hydrated. My name is Jimmy. I'm one of the pastors here at Fort Point. We're so glad that you are all here with us this morning. One of the things that we value here at Fort Point is having fun. So hopefully you came this morning with no preconceived expectations on what it means to be a part of a community of believers. So we're going to have a little fun here. We're going to do some family face-offs. So what I need is a couple different pairs of people who are maybe older generation and younger generation. And what we're going to do is we're going to challenge you to a question from the other person's generation to see who has better knowledge with either the younger generation if you're older or the older generation if you're younger, right? So I need a couple different pairs. Anybody want to volunteer? You come with somebody who maybe is outside of your generation. I see you hand out a partner. Stand up. Are you guys from the same generation? It's got to be one older person and one younger person. That's what anyone got to. Yeah. All right, who wants to be the? Okay, that works. That's perfect. Yeah, we'll do your. All right. So here's first for the parents. All right. The question is, how many characters are allowed in a tweet? The good news is not your question, so you're good. No? Would you believe me if I said 280 characters, which is an improvement. It used to start off just be 140, now they doubled it to 280. Get all of your thoughts. Donald Trump is a master of causing conflict with 280 characters. All right, now for the kid. Ready? How many kids were in the Brady Bunch? You're absolutely right, six kids. All right, so we got 1 point for the kid team. The kid team takes the lead. Early on, you got a partner? No? Well, it said they were going to do it. Somebody else will do it. Over here? All right, we'll get to you in a second. We got Linda and Amanda, you guys doing? All right, for the parents, what rap artist is nicknamed Yeezy? Oh, you guys are... You don't know any rap artists? Well, for the next time you have a test like this, you can tell them, it's Kanye West. Yes. Yeah, he's a rapper, yes. All right, Amanda, what singer is nicknamed Sweet Baby James? Any thoughts? Any help from the audience? James, not Brown, Taylor. James Taylor. All right, no points awarded that round. No
Fire and rain.
All right, Mike, yep, sir, give me 1 second. Mike and Jill here. You guys are obvious parent-kid team here. For the kid, what is the name of this comic book character? Huh? Archie what? You don't know his last name? Oh, only half a point. Archie Andrews is the full name. All right, Dad. What is the name of this TV show character? Use some father-daughter telepathy and tell your dad what it is, Joe.
You know who it is?
I know who it is.
I watch television.
No? All right, Joe, go ahead. Who is it? Jughead Jones. Obviously. Leave it to an artist to be judging the picture that we use up on the screen. All right, got another one over here. Beautiful. All right, so this one is for the kid first. This is not a computer. It is a, can you see it? Fax machine, is that your final answer? Typewriter, also known as a word processor. Yes, old school. Old school. All right, last one here. For the parent, stay in the game. This is not a USB flash drive. It is a, this is a tough one. Yes, it's, I don't know, did you say it? You said it, right? Yeah, a Juul, a vaping device. Maybe you've seen them around. Well done. So we have a lot of young people and old people who know nothing about their own generation, let alone the other's generation. So we have some work to do today after church. When you go out for lunch, why don't you ask some questions about what was cool and hip when you were around or not around. Welcome to Ford Point this morning. As you may have felt or experienced, hopefully we love to have fun. It's one of our values here at Ford Point, so hopefully you're able to join in and laugh a little bit about some generational things going on there. If you are new with us at Ford Point, we would love the opportunity to connect with you. We also have a free gift we'd like to give you back at our info center. Make sure you stop by there if you didn't get a chance to get it yet, as well as if you text the word welcome on your cell phone to the number you see on the screen there, 315-883-2213. That will allow us the ability to collect some information from you so we can send something to you in the mail. We would love the opportunity to just be a resource for you. Also, if you have any kind of needs or prayer requests as the week goes on, it's a number that's a direct line right to the church, so you can text that if there's anything going on that we could be helping you for going on. We have our church summer picnic coming up on the 19th, so make sure you mark your calendars. We're going to all be coming together to have a wonderful picnic at Linda Coyne's house out in Camilla. She has a pool and a lot of open space. So if you're at all able to help out with some food or activities, there's some sign-up sheets back at the info center, as well as they made a nice flyer with all the information for where the house is and contact information, so we can make sure we can all be there. We would love to have you be a part of that, okay? And then lastly, this morning, if you came to give at Ford Point, you have a couple different ways that you can do it. You can do it in person. You have a joy box back there by the door that you enter and exit out of that you can give, as well as online, right through our website, fordpoint.org. You can give right through that, or on your phones. We're a very cell phone friendly church. We do a lot of things to our cell phones. You can actually give just by texting any amount to 84321. That short code of 84321. Or have you set up an account to be able to give right from your phone. Unless you're T-Mobile. I hear T-Mobile has some issues. Or it's just Becky, I don't know. Could be either or. Hard to know for sure. But that's what's going on here this morning. If you would go ahead and stand to your feet. We're going to do some high fives this morning. Find a couple people that maybe you've met or not, that give some high fives. We don't have any music for it today, but find some people and give some high fives, and then we're going to get started with our music here this morning. All right, go get them.
Can't hear you, what?
Oh.
I hear you, but
Check 1, 2. Good morning, everyone. Sorry for a little bit of sound difficulty here today, and hope, here we go. We don't feedback you out here. But good morning. I hope you're ready to praise the Lord this morning. Youth, teens, college students.
yeah.
All ready, guys? We're all good? Jimmy.
Jimmy, back.
thought by now faithful, but you have never failed me yet. Waiting for change to come, knowing the battle's won, for you have never failed me yet. Let's sing that again. Walking around these walls, I thought by now they'd fall, but you have never failed me yet. Waiting for change to come, knowing the battle's won, for you have never failed me yet. The promise still stands. Your promise still stands. 'Cause great is your faithfulness. I'm still in your hands. This is my confidence. You never fail me. I know the night will last. I know the night won't last. Your will come to pass. My heart will sing your praise again. Jesus, you're still enough. Jesus, you're still enough. Keep me within your love. My heart will sing your praise again. Sing with me, church. Your promise still stands. Your promise still stands. Great is your faithfulness. Oh, faithfulness. I'm still in your hands. This is my confidence. You never fail. Sing Church, I know when trust has been broken, it's so hard to trust again, and it's so hard to believe sometimes that God can move mountains in front of us. Some of us have some really big mountains in front of us. Some of us might not even seen God already do it once. Man, let's do it again. And yet we have to believe. He has truly never failed us. He is faithful to his promises. Similarly, the promise still stands. Your promise still stands. Great is your faithfulness, your faithfulness. Still in your hands, this is my confidence. You never fail. One time you promise. Your promise still stands. 'Cause great is your faithfulness. Your faithfulness. Still in your hands. This is my confidence. You'll never fail me yet. Amen.
If you can hear this message, listen closely. To the exiled, misunderstood, or upside down, this is your message of hope. When problems come, use them. When enemies persecute you, love them. These struggles are a fire, refining you into gold. Look around. You are not forgotten. You are not alone. Challenge what is expected of you. This world is not your home. You are different.
So if I can for a minute, I wanted to start off this morning by taking an opportunity to celebrate some of the cool things that are going on around here. Yesterday, we had an awesome opportunity to participate in Eastwood's Market Days. I don't know if you guys were there yesterday, came in and helped or served or visited. Maybe purchased some things. I caught some cool straight out of Eastwood t-shirt swag here that the entire Doyle family is repping today. So a lot of fun we had yesterday. We wanted to celebrate because a lot of what we've been raising money for, we were able to put into use yesterday. We had the 4-point canopy was out there. You guys give so we could bring in Paw Patrol, and Paw Patrol was there for the kids. So there's a quick recap video. We just wanted to show you some of the cool things that happened yesterday as part of the just generous giving that you guys do here at 4-point and the sacrificial giving of your time and resources. So we just want to say thank you and let you enjoy a recap video here. Look at that, that's all from you guys. Yeah, give it up. Come on, Will. You guys still with smiles? You guys were a driving force behind those smiles. Thank you for doing what you do so we can do things like that. You know, one of our values, we talk about having fun is one of our values, but another one is we talk about how we value God's heart for the city over man's plans, right? There's going to be people elected and they're going to do different things, you know, pass laws and initiations to do different things, but that's not going to change what we're going to do. We're going to keep loving on our city and loving the people that are in it. So this is just another example of one of the ways that we get to just value God's heart for the city and be his hands and feet. And we had a steady line of people waiting to meet Paw Patrol for about 2 hours yesterday in the blistering heat. And our tent canopy was definitely the coolest, the biggest. They were able to be under there and survive and not die from exhaustion. The team that came to do Paw Patrol had one man call out, so we had to, what is it called when you're, I don't know if they were ringers or not, but we what is it called in the Army when you draft? We had to draft a couple of people there. So first, Elijah, I just want to say thank you. Definitely one of the prettiest Sky Paw Patrol members that we had. About halfway through, he came over and was like, I feel like I'm going to pass out. So at that point, we thought, okay, we better change it up a little bit. And then Ben Cameron, wherever you're at, Ben, he did the second half. Definitely the second prettiest Sky Patrol character we had there. So thank you guys. And then the Camerons, you guys were there from start to finish up on the setup and last boots off the ground. So thank you guys for that. Probably the cutest family that was there yesterday by far, meeting Paw Patrol, for sure. That's my kids, in case you're wondering who they were. And we even got the Eastwood Neighborhood Association wanted to join in. There's Jimmy Montos, he's one of the directors there of the Eastwood Neighborhood Association. So young, big, old, it doesn't matter, you couldn't resist the cute Paw Patrol. They were telling me afterwards the short 5-minute walk from our canopy to their cars was the hardest part of the 3 hours they were there, because they were right in the sun and it was like blazing hot. They came out of those costumes looking like they had just gone in a pool, but it was a lot of fun. So good times, good memories of all of that. So today we're starting a new series here at Forward Point called Different. It's based on the book of 1 Peter. Just to kind of give you a little context and background. Anybody have any ideas of who wrote the book of 1 Peter? Peter, yes. No trick questions there. Yes, it was Peter. Peter was kind of this uneducated fisherman who kind of gets pulled into this, job of being really one of the first youth leaders in history, right? There's some evidence that shows a lot of the disciples, except for Peter, were probably teenagers, and Peter kind of is the oldest one of the bunch working alongside Jesus as a youth leader to this group of ragtag fishermen and rejects, and Peter kind of gets a bad rap, right? He has some really powerful writings, but a lot of the times what we remember him for is denying Jesus 3 times there. But the reality is he gets into some pretty heavy, powerful ideas in his writings, right? Just some of the things that he talks about. He talks about things like foreknowledge, talks about divine election, sanctification, obedience, the blood of Christ, Trinity, revelation, right? All these things that you probably lost most of us all halfway through that list of big words, right? And this is some of the brainy things this uneducated man writes and talks about through the inspiration and guidance of the Holy Spirit. And if we could kind of summarize all of Peter's teachings and writings into 2 categories, it would be these. First is that we have a hope in Christ. Right? Christ is our hope. And then 2, it's how we are called as followers of Christ to be different in the world. Different from the world. And when you realize what was going on in the world in which Peter lived and in which he wrote these words, then it kind of makes the gravity of what he has to say all that more important. Right? 1 Peter was written sometime between the year 60 and 65 AD. This was during the reign of a very evil and corrupt man known as Emperor Nero. You may have heard about him in history class or world, geography, those kind of things. But if you've never heard that name before, let me kind of give you just a little background, how to paint a picture of what was going on, again, while these words were being penned. This man killed his mother, okay? Talk about some interesting Jerry Springer family dynamics going on. He killed his mother, killed his first wife, and then probably most likely was responsible for the death of his second wife as well. He was so twisted, history believes that he actually burned the city of Rome to the ground. Right? What we do know is that in July of 64 AD, there was a big fire that broke out for 6 days that burned the city uncontrollably. Right? They couldn't put it out, and finally they were able to get it to die down, only to have it reignited again for another 3 days. And history believes that Nero started this fire because he had this kind of insatiable desire to build and to rebuild and to kind of make his name for himself. And because the Senate didn't want to give him that power and resources to do so, he kind of took matters into his own hands by causing a fire to burn it all to the ground. So you can imagine that didn't really go over well with the people, right? And when people started blaming him, he decided he was going to kind of pass the blame onto this little group of very passionate people who were already hated, and they were known as Christ's ones, or Christians. Jesus followers, right? It was them. It was those Jesus followers. They're always up to no good. And he passed the blame onto them. This group of Christ followers goes from being simply just a hated group, kind of this awkward, weird group that worshiped this man who died on a cross, to now being this persecuted group where people were free to abuse. And Nero was so sick that he would actually put animal skins, right, dead animals, their skins, he would put them on Christians, lock them in cages, and then just release wild dogs to go and maul them and destroy these Christians. All sitting back, sipping his tea, eating his cheese, doing whatever, emperors do. He would also pour hot wax on Christians and tie them to trees. So when he had his evening parties and festivities, he would actually light them on fire, and they would provide the lighting for all of his evening parties, for these burning Christians and trees. That is the context in which Peter is writing these words that we're going to be looking at over the next 4 weeks here. What is going on in the background? So who is this message for? As we're beginning to talk about being different. This message, there's two groups really that this is going to apply to, right? Those of you who are maybe hurting right now. Right? You have some questions that are unanswered. Maybe you're in the midst of some kind of trial and you're enduring something difficult. Maybe it's some kind of financial loss, the loss of a job, your health is poor. Maybe there's some kind of tension in some important relationships that you have. Maybe the direction of your kids is going opposite of the direction you had hoped that they would go. Or maybe you're dealing with some kind of addiction, something that has control over you. Right? If you're going through a difficult time, then this message is for you. The second group of people this is for is for any of you who are going to one day go through a trial. All right? Which is probably all of us. I heard it said one time, at any point in your life, it can probably be described as either going into a trial, walking through a trial, or just coming out of a trial. And really it sums up our lives. Life can be difficult. So no matter what you're going through, we want to hear from God this morning and over the course of the next couple weeks in a way that is really going to speak to us who are hurting. And that is the context as we begin this very important book. So if you want to dive in with me, if you have a Bible, we're going to be turning to 1 Peter 1:1. Or if you're following along in the YouVersion app, you can follow along with the notes there if you have that downloaded. Or it's going to be up on the screen, whichever is easier for you. But here we are, just diving in. 1 Peter 1:1. Here is the words that Peter starts off with. He's in this context, right? He says, "This letter is from Peter, an apostle of Jesus Christ. I'm writing to God's chosen people who are living as foreigners in the provinces of Pontus, Galatia, Cappadocia, Asia, and Bithynia." Paul gives these persecuted people, these Christ ones, these Christians, this description. He calls them what? He calls them foreigners. Right? This word foreigners can be translated a couple different ways. If you have different versions, you may have a word that says exiles, or maybe sojourners, or aliens, or strangers. It's this idea that you're different. Right? That's not your home. And that's the word that Peter uses to describe Christians in this land as aliens, as foreigners. You were created with this kind of eternal purpose that goes way beyond anything that you can fulfill here on earth. Right? What does it feel like when you're at home? You're relaxed, you kind of let your hair down, right? You take your shoes off and you smell the house with your stinky feet, right? Maybe that's just me and what I do. But there's just this kind of attitude where you're complacent and you're relaxing. And Peter says, no, this is not your home. It's not a place to grow complacent and just relax. For those of us who are on this journey of following Christ, it means, that we're going to have different values than the world and the people around us. And it means that we're going to have different morals. There's going to be a different belief system that we're going to have. When it starts to collide with the world around you, don't be shocked. Because you are the foreigners. You are the exiles. You are the aliens in this land. You're going to be different as a mom. You're going to be different as a dad. The way that you treat your wife as a husband is going to be different than what the status quo is around you. How you respond to someone who mistreats you is going to be different than what the world says and how to respond. You will be different in the way that you spend and invest your money, and the way that you spend and invest your time. People are going to look at you and, man, why are you always serving at your church and doing things for the community? Why aren't you relaxing? It's the summertime. Why aren't you drinking some pina colada in the pool? Right? Because this world is not our home. You and I are a foreigner. We're called to be different. And what we want to look at today is what Peter shows us, that we're kind of if you're in the middle of a trial, because this world is not your home, you can have a different kind of faith when you go through something difficult. And what does having a different faith look like when you're going through trials? Well, remember who Peter is writing to, right? Peter is writing to these Christians who are being persecuted, and in verses 6 and 7, it's almost shocking what he tells them to do, right? In this setting of being persecuted, he says this. He says, so be truly glad. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine in the rounding up of your friends and your family at nighttime? In the distance, you hear their screams and their final breaths. He says this, he says, so be truly glad. There's wonderful joy ahead. Even though you must endure many trials for a little while, these trials will show that your faith is genuine. Endure many trials for a little while. Right? Even though God may not make these trials go away, there is a wonderful joy ahead. These trials have a purpose, and what they're going to do is they're going to show that your faith is genuine. You see, if there's such a thing as a genuine faith, then there's also the possibility for the opposite of that, right? The opposite of that is that there might be false faith. We in this Western world, right, where it's kind of easy to feel at home and relaxed and don't really endure a whole lot of persecution, we can find ourselves at a place where we have had maybe a false faith. You see, in some parts of the world, if you claim Christ, it can cost you everything, right to your life. There, you don't see false faith because it could cost them everything. You don't find too many, at-home Christians. But in our kind of Christian culture that we have in America, it can be really easy to be comfortable and fit right in, kind of go with the flow. People who would call themselves a Christian but aren't at all having this kind of false faith. If there's a genuine faith, then there can also be a false faith. And how sad would it be to have gone through all these motions and rituals and for however many years, and then on the other end all we had to show for it was a faith that wasn't real. So we're going to look at just a couple of different types of false faith. If you're taking notes, this first one is just this idea of an inherited faith. This is where your mom was a Methodist, your dad was a Baptist, and you're just kind of born into, some kind of church membership by if you're born in America, you're automatically a citizen. Kind of this same idea, right? Just because you're born and your parents both kind of claim some church faith. I'm not really a Buddhist, right? I'm not a Muslim, so I must be a Christian. My parents were, my grandma was. She even gave me this really big Bible that kind of, I keep under the coffee table that's there. That's got to count for something, right? It's this inherited faith, but it's not your faith. All the time in youth ministry, it was a huge shocker for me when I kind of changed the way that I realized, in youth ministry it was always about having fun and games and providing this entertainment for kids. But what we began to see is that in youth ministry, when kids graduated from high school and went off to college, they would begin to graduate from their faith. Right? Because it was never about it becoming their own. It was an inherited faith. And we don't want to live on just an inherited faith. It's possible that some of you could be in that place this morning. You don't really know why you go to church. It's just what you've always done because your parents had you do it, so now you're here doing it. And that's all right. And we're glad that you're here. But we don't want to sell ourselves short by just living in this inherited faith, because God has a much bigger purpose for you. An inherited faith. Second thing we can see is there's a shallow faith that we can have. Right, Jesus talked about this type of faith in a story that he told about a farmer who's sowing seed. Right, there's this farmer and he's just throwing seed, and he talks about different places that the seed lands. And he says some took root and a little plant sprung up, but because their root wasn't deep, it was shallow faith. And when the worries of life came along, it began to choke the life out of it, and it died. Why? Because the roots weren't deep enough. It was a shallow faith. Again, there may be some of us here who may notice a slight resemblance. Right? I've seen it before many, many times. One day there's nothing that can ever separate you from your relationship with God. You're on fire. But maybe a couple weeks or a couple months down the road, some kind of trial or issue comes along, it begins to choke the life right out of you. And you're no longer doing the same things that cultivated that intimacy with God that you felt or had. And because there was never any real roots that grew down, your faith is choked up and dies. And then this morning, my goal is maybe to get up in a little bit of your business here. Right? If you are kind of hit and miss on Sunday mornings, or even consistently say, I come every Sunday morning, then there's a good chance that your faith may be shallow. This weekly gathering that we have, it's great for getting together and being encouraged, but it's not designed to be able to get you through Monday to Saturday. This is not our home. Right? We're not growing comfortable. There's always this next step for us here at Forward Point. This is why you may hear us talk about life groups all the time. Right? We believe that life change truly happens not in rows, but in circles. It's in these environments where we can get to know each other, where we can be open and honest and vulnerable. That's where true life change happens. That's where true roots can begin to grow deep. But if you just rely on hit and miss every now and then Sunday mornings, or even every Sunday morning, really, there's a chance that your roots, your faith is shallow. Listening to a podcast is not being part of the church. It's good, it's helpful, it can be beneficial. It's not going to help your roots grow deep. I understand, right? Sometimes it feels like there's there's always a weird person in life groups, right? Have you ever gone to a life group and thought, man, There are some weird people there. I never want to go back and do that again, right? Of course, you could be, you're like, no, my life group is perfect. We have no weird people. You have no weird people. You'll argue with me. Yeah, we're free from weird people, right? If that's you, then there's a good chance that you, my friend, are the weird one of that group. All right? Self-awareness, okay, also helps for your roots to grow deep. But we have to deal with the weird people. It's part of what helps our faith to grow deep, and we have to forgive people who hurt us. We have to talk about things that are uncomfortable. And that we're doing that, right? The roots begin to grow and to get bigger. And there may be some here where you're kind of here and you're kind of there, and today the call is for you to take that next step towards being in a life, or taking that next step to being committed to your faith growing stronger, growing deeper. Right? Because the reality is, if you don't take that next step, we have an enemy who's waiting to take you out, right? To choke the life right out of you in that shallow faith. And I don't want to be sitting across from you in 6 months talking through some story that you would never have written for yourself, but you find yourself there anyways because of this shallow faith has allowed the life to be choked out of your marriage, maybe a friendship, your dreams. Deep, deep faith. Church, Big C Church is people coming together to give their lives to each other in service of Jesus. It's not these four walls. It's not the Palace Theater. It's not the building down the street that's got a cross on it. Those aren't churches. You and I, as we come together, we make up the church. And we're not going to have a shallow faith. And then thirdly, there's this idea of a conditional faith. This is where we talk a good game. Yeah, I believe, I love Jesus, I love God. Right? But as long as things are going our way. And I'm sure we all know someone who has had their world shattered through the loss of someone meaningful to them. I feel like just recently I've seen a lot of friends who have had people who are dying. Right? It shakes your world. And how can I believe in a God who would allow this to happen to me? How can I believe in this great kind of conditional faith, and it's a false faith? For those of us who are sitting on this kind of secret false faith, the trials that we go through reveal the depth of our faith. And that's what God wants to turn into deep relationship and intimacy. Because we've all felt the pressure and thought, man, my faith is being tested right now. My faith is being tested. There's a lot going on right now. And how is it that God uses trials in our faith? This is what we're going to dive into this morning. And the first thing, again, if you're taking notes, is that trials reveal your faith. The things that you're going through is really when your faith comes out, who you're made of. If it's a genuine faith or a false faith. Peter says this in verse 7. He says, these trials will show that your faith is genuine. I've heard it said this way, a faith that has been tested is one that can be trusted. Right? If you're somebody you've gone through the fire, you've gone through the ringer, your faith has been tested, that's somebody who I can put my trust in. It's like trying to find somebody to take care of my kids, right? I'm not going to put somebody in that position who's never watched kids before. Not because I'm worried about what they're going to do to my kids. I'm worried about what my kids are going to do to them, right? I come home and they're strung from the ceiling fan or something, right? My kids look all innocent on pictures with Paw Patrol, but get them in a room by yourself and they're in trouble, right? No, you need someone who's been tested, right? Mary Poppins. And this is Peter's story, right? Peter has this kind of bumper cars, whiplash kind of on top of the world, and then failure journey over and over again. And it brought him to this place where he could pen these words, right? But let's look back 25 years when he's having a conversation with Jesus. And he goes like this. Jesus says to him, he says, Simon, Simon, Satan has asked to sift all of you as wheat, right? Just that by itself. Satan wants to sift you, right? Satan doesn't think you have what it takes. He wants to see what you're made of. Don't think for a second forward point that you don't have an adversary who is actively trying to take you away from the things of God. But I have a prayer for you, Simon, that your faith may not fail. Right? His trials reveal our faith. And he says, man, that your faith may not fail. And when you have turned back, right? Jesus is saying it's going to happen. You're going to fall. You're going to go the wrong way. You're going to choose the lesser path. But when that happens, when you turn back, strengthen your brothers. How did God use the trials to strengthen Peter's faith? Well, let's be honest. In the early years, Peter was kind of obnoxious, should we say? A very consistent, very hot-headed, kind of always, getting out there and then realizing, oops, I may have spoken too soon. But in the later years, we find a Peter who's dramatically different, right? He's incredibly bold. He's full of faith. He's tenacious, and wound up, history believes, died as a martyr for his faith. And let's look at one of those trials through that built up Peter's faith, right? The faith. It's a time when they were all hanging together, and Jesus says, man, someone here in this room is going to betray me. And again, obnoxious Peter kind of jumps out. He says, never, I would never do that to you, Jesus. I would never abandon you, even to death, to the end. I would die for you. Is this mantra that he kind of speaks up. And then what happens later that night, not just one time, not just 2 times, but 3 times, Peter denied ever having known Jesus. And one of those times it was to a little girl. Right? Peter's faith got beaten down, got choked out by a little girl. Do you know Jesus, mister? No. Don't know the man. Right? But as Jesus is dying on the cross, the reality and weight of what Jesus had told him and what Peter did begins to just rip at his heart. But after Jesus rises from the grave, he has this heart-to-heart with Peter where Jesus basically says, man, it doesn't matter your past, Peter. It doesn't matter what you did. Man, if you can turn back, I still am going to use you to feed my sheep. Will you, Peter, feed my sheep? And then just a short time after that, Peter goes on to be the guest speaker of what is known as Pentecost. And the Holy Spirit drops down like a top on all these people, and thousands are being added to their number on a daily basis. From this guy who just a few days ago was denying he even knew Jesus. But that trial begins to build his faith, and he turns back, and his roots begin to grow deep in this Savior who would love him no matter what. The brother of Jesus, James, he wrote it this way. He says, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance." Right? It's producing deep, growing, healthy roots. And whatever it is you're going through, God does not waste a hurt or a tear. It's not just about being able to now you can relate to people who also are going through that same issue. Yeah, God may use you, but the reality is it's about your relationship with Jesus becoming one now, intimacy and faith as the journey that God walking through with you through that will never leave you. The second thing, and how God uses trials in our faith, is that trials draw you closer to God. In 1 Peter verses 8 and 9, watch the power of the language and the imagery that Peter is going to use here. Right? The gospel, this good news, he says, not that God saves us from our trials. It's that this good news is that he saves us from our sins. And he never said that we wouldn't have troubles. In fact, Jesus said the exact opposite. He said, in this world, you're going to have troubles. You're going to have hard times, but take heart that I have overcome the world. But the good news is not that he saves us from our trials. It's that he saves our souls from the powers of sin. And maybe you're thinking, but Jimmy, man, God will never give you more than you can handle, right? I know I've heard that. And that is a misrepresentation of a verse that says God will never let you be tempted beyond what you can bear. But the Bible never says that God will never give you more than you can handle. I'm absolutely convinced that God will often allow you to have more than you can handle because that teaches you to depend on him. It begins to draw you closer to God if you allow it to. And when you're hurting and your roots run deep and you're turning to him for comfort, you're drawing closer to God. It's much like the process of building muscle, right? Which I am a professional at. I know all about. Right? When you're working against the tension, if you just kept lifting what you could handle, right, that muscle doesn't grow. It's when you're lifting more than you can handle and you can't do it anymore that you'll start to get bulging muscles like me, all right? So let that be an encouragement to you. You see people walk the same journey. I see it all the time. Our faith is not what we see. Our faith is in who God is. We got to go and be at Kingdom Bound this last week with the Skinners and the Camerons, and it was a great time. And I loved being at the evening concerts because it reminded me right after there was one concert and there'd be a speaker in it, and it was kind of the main event for the night. But during the speaking part, the person would come up and people would give their lives to Jesus. And just watching them, walk down, get out of their seats, and go over to be prayed for with all the volunteers, it was very emotional for me because that was a very meaningful time in my own life growing up as a kid. Right? There's all sorts of different times I remember kind of giving my life to Jesus for different motives. As a young kid, I remember doing it because you got a prize if you gave your heart to Jesus. So I was like, sign me up, right? I'll repeat the prayer. Just give me the toy, right? But one of the more meaningful times was at Kingdom Bound as a young person myself growing up, and it just brought back the memories of, right, it was a real encounter, it was authentic, it was genuine. But I kind of went from having inherited faith from my parents and growing up in this Christian home to now a shallow faith. Right, I believed Jesus was real, and this was a real experience that I was having. But let me tell you, I went on afterwards to have some serious rebellious years. But I'll always look back at that being a very meaningful time for me, making that change from inherited to shallow faith, and to watch other people kind of begin the same journey, or maybe even a repeated journey. Because the reality is, it doesn't have to be, this one and done time where you're going to say a prayer and then your roots are deep for the rest of your life. Right? As our faith starts off shallow and trials come, we're going to find ourselves choked. No life. But that's not the end of the story. Right? The story goes on, and Peter says, if you turn back. Right? And if we turn back and we begin to take that next step, for some of you, maybe that turning back and taking the next step was just to come here on a Sunday morning. And that is just a small part of your faith going from itty bitty to a little bigger. But maybe you're here this morning, and for you, your faith is now just kind of shallow to what it could be because you've just been relying on Sunday mornings from time to time. And there's a next step for you, right? The next step for you is to begin to commit to the process of life change in a life group, where you can go from feeling God's presence dealing with whatever you're walking through here in a row, to then beginning to be vulnerable and sharing what you're going through with people around you who will start off as weirdos, but then become your closest friends. Or for you, maybe the next step is you've been, coming on Sundays, you're in a life group, but you've never stepped out to say, I want to serve. I want God to use me through whatever is happening to reach out to other people. Maybe it's dressing up as a Paw Patrol character. Maybe it's being a smiling face at the door. It's wiping and changing little baby butts upstairs. I don't know what it is, but for you, that is the next step, where God wants to begin to grow your roots even deeper. And He begins to work through you as you're holding that baby, and then for the first time, the baby smiles back as a result of you giving him a clean butt. What a ministry. Right? How many smiling faces did we see in that video? Right? Just little moments where maybe a little chisel was able to crack a hole, and the Spirit of God was able to come in and give them a glimpse, a taste of, and you were created for something bigger, for something more. Our faith, friends, is not what we see. Our faith is who God is. And through the trials, we're called to be different. We will go through times that are going to be more than we can bear, but it's in those moments where we begin to grow and we begin to rely on each other and grow in new ways. Will you bow your heads with me this morning as we wrap up? God, we thank you so much that you have never left us, that you've never forsaken us. It's different times where we've maybe turned our back from the plans and purposes that you've had for us to go our own way and do our own thing. And this morning, first and foremost, you're calling us back to you. Maybe you're here this morning and that kind of describes the relationship that you've had currently with God, where you kind of have your back to Him because you went off on your own way. And just like you had that conversation with Peter, and Peter says, man, if you just turn back, then God is going to begin to walk with you through the trials and see your faith grow. And this morning, that's what you need to do, is to turn back. Or maybe even just turn to Him for the first time. So if you're here this morning and the feeling that you're feeling kind of in your gut or in your spirit of relating to that's who you are this morning, I would encourage you just to have your conversation with God this morning. And I'm going to have one with Him up here that might help you give some words to the process that God is doing in your life. It might sound something like, God, I'm sorry for the things that I've allowed to distract me and pull me away. For the different things that have happened in my life, the hurts and the pains that I've used as excuses to say that you don't care, or you don't exist, or how is it possible for these bad things to happen if you're truly there. But God, this morning I'm answering your call to be back in a relationship with you, to turn back to you, because I believe that you have a plan and a purpose for me. That you created me on purpose for a purpose. And I want to stop just quitting when the going gets tough, just stop doing my own thing when the trials are getting too tough, and I want to dive into you. Plans that you have for my life. So God, I pray that you would help me just right now to allow myself to surrender my life completely to you. God, for the hurts and the pains, God, I pray that you would just bring healing to each one of those incidences, each one of those stories, each one of those dark times in the lives represented here that have allowed bitterness and resentment and pain to grow and to fester. We just believe your Holy Spirit to come in and to bring life, to replace those areas with life, with new life and purpose this morning. God, thank you for the work that you're doing in hearts, maybe for the first time or for those coming back to you to say, I'm going to do life with you. For the rest of us, maybe you're here this morning and this world that you're living kind of feels at home. Kind of feels comfortable. I mean, it's not glamorous, but it's comfortable. It's easy. And the call for Forward Point this morning is that we would assume our identity of being foreigners, of being exiles, of being aliens, where we're not comfortable anymore. Where we're no longer comfortable with just watching people go by without any purpose. That we could be different in this world. So if you're here this morning and you feel like there's some kind of pull towards the next step, or you're not even entirely sure what it is, it's not as cookie cutter as a life group or serving, but you feel like there's a draw towards, man, I gotta get out of being comfortable and I gotta take a step towards the uncomfortableness so I can allow God to begin to continue to grow my faith deep. If that's you here this morning, right, everyone's eyes are closed, heads bowed, but just kind of as a physical act towards this new life that God is calling you to, as a response to what he is saying directly to your heart, I'm just going to ask you just to stand right where you're at. Just stand to your feet as a response and say, God, I've been kind of content and happy with the way things are, but that's not what I was called for. That's not what I was created for. I was created and designed for so much more, and I want to take this step towards you as a proclamation to say I'm not going to settle anymore. So if that's you here this morning, I'm just going to pray first. All of you would just respond to him and take that step and just stand to your feet and say, God, that's me. That's me here this morning. God, you see every single person who's standing to their feet, answering this call that you are burning inside of them to so much more than what they've had. And God, I pray that you would come and meet every single person standing right where they're at and saying, I want to take that next step. And God, you would begin to create a vision and plans and purposes and hopes and dreams for what that looks like specific to them. God, that we wouldn't just allow them to kind of fall into what we think that should be, but God, that you would begin to breathe your life under their wings and that they would fly. That the people around them would notice, man, the difference. There's something different about them. That they would be living on purpose. And then, God, for the trials that they're going to go through, that they would know that they're never alone. And as they step out in this new level, that there's going to be a new level of adversary that's going to come after them and try to bring them down. But through the people that are sitting here beside them and across from them, they're never going to be alone. They're going to have supports. They're going to have a team cheering them on. And those roots of faith are going to grow deep. And this day, August 5th, is going to be a day that is etched in the minds of a day where it all changed. The direction of their life, the course, it changed because of what you're doing in their hearts and their spirits here this morning. We thank you so much for this work. God, we're excited for all of us, God, that you would, if you would just help us, please, to be people who can be different even through trials, in the way that we go through trials. We don't want to be free of trials. We want to be with you through trials and to grow deep. So would you help us to fall into your arms during these times? We love you. We thank you. Be with us throughout the course of these next couple weeks as we just really dive into what it means to be different and no longer content with just pretending like we're home. We love you. Amen. If there's certain things that you need prayer for, that you're going through, or that maybe God just kind of placed on your heart this morning, we would love to talk with you about that. We'll be up here for as long as is needed to just join in with you and hear and cheer you on. So make sure not to leave. If there's something that you want to share that you need prayer for, we'd love to be able to join you and celebrate with you what God is doing in your life. Otherwise, man, go hug somebody, give some laughs and some smiles, enjoy some awesome food that's out there in the cafe. We love you guys. We'll see you next week. Or at a life group, or to hang out Wednesday nights, Stephen's house, sometimes on Fridays over the summer at the Doyle's house. All right? Love you guys. Have a good week.